The opinions expressed on the following program are strictly those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of WCZT, regional media, coastal broadcasting, personnel, or advertisers. Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie features lively discussions of a wide range of global, domestic, and kitchen table financial topics. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
And welcome back to another episode of Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your host, Melanie Collette, broadcasting live from beautiful and very chilly Wildwood, New Jersey. It is super chilly here in Wildwood, New Jersey, here in Cape May County. Now, you know, I was talking to a person the other day who has traveled around the world. He's a correspondent for a prestigious news channel, and he did not know where lovely Cape May County, New Jersey was. I was shocked, I tell you, floored that he did not know where we were. And so I thought that if he, who has traveled to 44 countries, did not know where we were, that perhaps someone listening had no idea where lovely Cape May County, New Jersey is. So if you look at a map and you're looking at New Jersey, there's this little little peninsula on the end of New Jersey. And that is where lovely Cape May County is. And that's where Wildwood, New Jersey is, where 98.7 The Coast's home base. And so if you ever want to visit a lovely place with beaches and wineries and one of the top zoos in the entire world, the Cape May County Zoo, you should definitely come to visit. And if my friend Diane Weiland over at Cape May County Tourism wants to send me a little check for that plug, feel free. Actually, she's a friend of mine. I'm just kidding. But Cape May County is just a lovely place to visit, and I thought I'd mention it. Believe it or not, fall, people usually think of Cape May County as a summer thing, but fall and winter, there's quite a lot to do as well. And it's just really a beautiful, beautiful place. That said, really excited about tonight's show because I'm very huge into politics, meaning I just have like that disease some of us who were involved in politics refer to it as. We find it exciting, challenging. It's important, as I say in my tagline, because it's your money. And people want to deny this and not think about it or choose to just be in denial. But a lot of these elections tie in with your money. And that's part of what we do here at Money Talk with Melanie. So yesterday were the midterm elections, and my guest the first hour is Ron Edwards, who's host of the Ron Edwards American Experience. Very excited to have him on the show to talk about midterm election results. He's very knowledgeable. He swings to the right, much like I do, but that's okay. He'll be balanced in his analysis, I'm so sure. But believe it or not, while we both share the same political leanings, we do not agree on everything. So I'm very interested to hear his analysis of how things went this midterm election cycle. Nationally, it did not seem that there was the red tsunami that was anticipated by the polling. I really want to talk to him about that because this is not the first time, at least that I can recollect, that the polling has kind of failed us. And, no disrespect to pollsters, it's a very difficult climate to poll in and to predict. And so, but I can't wait to talk about that with Ron Edwards. And then in hour 2, the 8 p.m. hour, we have Dr. Jennifer London, who is the co-author of a book called Leadership and Legacy by the executive chairman of CACI. She's going to talk to us about business and entrepreneurship for veterans. Thought that was a very important topic. You know, you have many veterans going back into the job market. It can be a transitional period. That book talks a lot about entrepreneurship and business, and we're particularly looking at that from a veteran perspective. So I'm looking forward to talking to her about that as well. But before we do, some big things going on in the news besides the midterm elections. Mark Zuckerberg fired 13% of Meta, which is formerly known as Facebook, and that this is the first layoff that Mark Zuckerberg has ever had at Meta, and someone leaked a video. I'm not totally sure that the video, whenever things get leaked, I am never completely sure that it was a leak. Like, if you leak something that makes you look really good, I'm not saying that this is one of those instances, but I'm just saying it happens. You leak something gets quote unquote leaked, but it just so happens to make you look awesome. Like, I feel like that was not like, it's leaked in that I gave it to the press because it made me look awesome. But yeah, Wednesday afternoon, hours after the company announced it was laying off 13% of its staff, he talked to everybody via video. And I want to read kind of the whole thing that he said, because the transcript was included in the article I read. But I just thought it was, to be honest, I was a little like, okay, despite that you spied on us and kind of ruined an election, at least you did the right thing here. That's my opinion, and that's why we have the the disclaimer at the beginning of the show, so that 98.7 The Coast doesn't get sued for like the crazy things I say. But so Mark Zuckerberg says, in response to the fact that he's laying off 13% of his staff, and that's huge. He says, I know there must be a range of different emotions. I want to say up front that I take full responsibility for this decision. I'm the founder and CEO. I'm responsible for the health of our company, for our direction, and for deciding how we execute that, including things like this. And this was ultimately my call. And it was one of the hardest calls that I've made to make in the 18 years of running my company. And a lot of why it's hard is obviously it's a big impact on your lives, but also for our mission. We're losing people who you've really put your heart and soul into this place. Each of you is talented and passionate, and each of you has played a role in making Meta the success that it is. No matter what team you may have worked on, each of you played a role in contributing to the products that billions of people use to connect every day. I thought it was a really nice statement. And if I'm not mistaken, I read earlier today that he gave everybody 4 months severance, which is also very nice. Like, a lot of people don't get that. Sometimes you just get a couple weeks notice and you're out and that's it. So, if you have to handle something like this, also Twitter laid a lot of people off. You want to really look at these layoffs and really pay attention. I was asked about this in an interview a week or so ago. What did I think was going to happen? What did I make of the layoffs happening? And what I make of it is that these large companies, have some pretty high paid consultants to forecast these kinds of things, whereas your smaller businesses probably don't. My guess is that the economic situation looks pretty bleak, and that the forecasts are not very cheery, and that's why they're taking these bigger companies. Microsoft laid off a few thousand people not too long ago. So that's why I'm thinking these companies are taking these big steps to kind of tighten up the purse strings, so to speak, and be more careful with their money, because they're prospecting that things are not going to be good for a little while. So we actually already to 7-Eleven to the first commercial break. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. We'll be back with Ron Edwards.
Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie features lively discussions of a wide range of global, domestic, and kitchen table financial topics. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie. I'm very excited to introduce my first guest, currently the host of the Ron Edwards American Experience talk show, which covers the issues affecting our daily lives here and around the world. The Ron Edwards American Experience talk show airs weekdays at 3 p.m. across several networks, including K-Start Talk Radio. Ron Edwards also produces and hosts an award-winning radio commentary, The Ron Edwards Notebook. Ron also serves as the founder and board member of the Greater Commission United. It is a worldwide chaplaincy ministry headquartered near Grand Rapids, Michigan, with satellite campuses throughout America, Nigeria, and Great Britain. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome to Money Talk with Melanie, the one and only Mr. Ron Edwards.
Well, hello, Melanie. It's wonderful to be back with you on your show, and Thanks so much.
Hi, darling. I was so happy that I had you scheduled for this particular day at this particular time. I could not think of anyone I'd rather talk to than you about this topic, about doing a midterm recap for yesterday, because a lot of interesting things happened.
Yeah, well, it's man, and when I saw the results of this, it's a hot mess, Melanie. This was not the results that many of us were thinking should happen. There were hints that the red wave they were talking about might not occur, but I didn't think it would winnow down to a trickle. I mean, this is really, really bad for the country, in my opinion.
I tend to agree with you. I'm very frustrated right now. Now I will tell you, in our little corner of the world in Cape May County, New Jersey, we crushed everything in our path. The Cape GOP, or Cape May County Regular Republican organization, and just full disclosure, I have bias as I serve as vice chair of that organization. Shout out to Michael John Donahue, who's an absolute rock star, as our chairman. But yeah, we literally crushed everything in our path. But I realized that, like, I am spoiled, right?
I'm in political hell.
You're in Michigan, right?
Yes.
Oh, my dear.
This place is midnight blue. Whitmer was reelected, and this is the honest to God truth, Melanie. People in Michigan are so enamored with abortion that they prefer that over prosperity and a sealed border, good education in schools, and I'm not exaggerating. People really made that the front and center issue. And just to give you an example of how hard the Democrats worked and got their success, there was a Proposal 3 that literally wipes out parental consent for minors to receive puberty-blocking drugs, undergo sex change operations, sterilization, or even genital mutilation. It allows for very late-term and partial birth abortions, and would also, it is the most extreme abortion policy in the world, and that is literally true. If I were to explain everything in this thing, you would drop your microphone or something. This is just horrible. It literally wipes out the rights of parents to stand up and say, no, you will not mutilate my child. From school or whatever. If school, you're 13 years old and you think Timmy, you want to be Teresa, the teachers can take you to wherever. You can get her done. If you're a parent now and you go to fight against it, guess what happens? The law will come after you, the parent. This is going to be ensconced into the Michigan Constitution.
Oh, you don't have to have me guess, because I was a former public school teacher and I have receipts. Yeah. Okay? I got the receipts. I don't have to guess. I know exactly what happens under that scenario, and you told not one lie.
Oh, no, it's impossible to lie on this. But yet in my home state of Ohio, right next door, bloody red, totally red up and down, just like Georgia, just like where you live, Florida. It's a different world here in Michigan. We've tried, we worked hard, did a lot of calls, door knocking, whatever, begging, pleading with people, because this is something that could be rolled out nationally. I really believe that. It will have an impact like you wouldn't believe.
Well, and the rest of my state, of course, is very blue. And we are very protective of our little county here because the state of New Jersey is so blue. And they tend to, follow like places like New York. Like, so, however New York goes, so goes New Jersey with their state laws. But we, of course, are working very hard to change that on the state level here in New Jersey. But it is very tough. And, these things that they're putting in place, particularly in the school system, which is one of the reasons why I left. It was hurting me spiritually, like not just hurting me in every other way in the environment, but mostly in a spiritual sense. To literally ask teachers to lie to parents is just outrageous.
Yeah. when you announced that you were leaving, even though I don't know you personally or anything, I kind of felt sad because I've read your discussions and things about, things going on in the school system and how you've been working hard. And I'm like, damn, there goes another good one out the system. And because of that, every time a good teacher leaves, that multiplies the horrors that are going on in government school systems. And I understand why you left. I can't blame you for leaving. But at the same time, with each good teacher leaving, it makes it that much worse. And it's just like a problem that feeds on itself. And it's really sad.
Well, I'll say this without revealing too much. Mm-hmm. Consider me an outlier. Part of the reason why I left this was part of a plan. I never planned on teaching longer than 10 years to begin with. I taught for 12.
Okay.
Part of the reason is because I'm very interested in education policy, and I don't believe, unlike most bureaucrats, that you should be making policy about things that you know nothing about, particularly if you're passionate. So having spent 12 years on the front lines, I feel like I will be far more effective outside the classroom than in at this point. So I'll just say that. So never fret, my dear. It's not over.
Amen. I like hearing that.
Do not fret. So it's like you were reading my notes talking about abortion, and I want to move on to a related topic, especially with you being a minister, which I can't believe I forgot until I read your bio. I was like, oh, that's right, he is a chaplain. I forgot about that. So, but I want to ask you, I was like, Ron, there's so many things, but I had forgotten about that. How faith and politics probably intermingle in people making their choices, or does it, as far as the midterms were concerned? Do you think people followed their faith, followed their pocketbook? What happened here?
Well, some wisely followed their pocketbook and their faith, but many, the ones who believe in a total separation of church and state, of course, followed something else in the blue land, and you can interpret that as you will. I think, if you take it back to the beginning of this country, that there is a place for Christian principles in politics, because our country was founded upon that. And that is supposed to be the basis of operation to influence your decision-making, whether it's in politics, whether it's in education or whatever, even economics.
For sure.
Once you take all that out and it's replaced by immorality or whatever, those standards dictate how you run your education system into the ground, your economy. You don't care about your border. So each direction, whether it's immorality, whether you have Christian-based policies or whatever, or influences, or principles, that's the better way to put it. If you have Christian-based principles and the goal is good, you're going to make better decisions. That's what influenced Donald Trump, in my opinion, when it came to decisions he made. Not talking about him personally, but I mean his decisions concerning the country, why he wanted to put America first, and why, in the opposite direction, Biden wants to put America last.
That makes sense to me as well. Let me ask you, what do you think is the disconnect? And this is, I'm right here in New Jersey. I'm right next to Pennsylvania, and I'm looking at Fetterman getting elected, and I'm like, how? Just how? Like, what do you think goes on in the minds of people who pulled the lever for him? I don't. Like, are they thinking logically and reasonably? I just don't know how you logically come to the conclusion that you're going to pick him over Dr. Oz. Now, I have my own opinions about Dr. Oz as a candidate, and that might be for another show, but Fetterman versus Oz, are we joking?
Well, it comes down to the same thing that I witnessed here in Michigan. When people disengage themselves from logical thinking, from good principles, they are going to pick the worst of the worst, and it's going to continue to devalue even more so. Fetterman is just the beginning of our massive decline if we don't make a change somehow in this society very soon. He is a superb representation of what happens to a people when they throw good principles to the wayside, and that is what they desire. I'm not shocked, because look at what we had, what they chose here in Michigan. Governor
Yes.
Whitmer. I mean, and oh Lord, I mean, that woman is just as bad as Fetterman. I think she's more intelligent than he is, but it's the same mentality.
Absolutely terrible. I mean, she really is, and so is he. Like, I don't understand, but I think there's a lot of groupthink that may be going on.
Well,
go ahead.
Melanie, see, my dad used to tell me when I was a little boy, government is nothing more than a reflection of the people. If the people are good, they're going to pick good. They're going to fight for that. And even if they don't know, if they hear good principles, they're going to, okay. They're going to logically come to a better conclusion. But once that is eradicated, it is human nature to wax worse and worse and worse. And if this is not brought to heel very soon, this will be a great nation no more. It's gotten to that point, I believe.
You're being really doomy and gloomy, but I know you're super smart when it comes to these things, and I'm like, he's right.
But in a way, I'm not, because sometimes things have to get really bad, and I think they are, and hopefully people will say, you know what, they're bad enough, but I thought they were going to say that this time around.
Same.
But maybe, and it'll be like a slap that wakes them up. And hopefully those people that are so-called conservatives and Christians or whatever, that they will become more focused. And because there's a lot of folks on our side in some of these states that stayed home and did not even go to vote.
Which is amazing. Or they bullet voted, like I think what happened in Georgia. And, for those who are not like entrenched in the political world, a bullet vote is when you only vote for like one area or one candidate. So say you have like a school board election and there's 6 candidates and you're supposed to pick 3. The strategy is you bullet vote the one candidate that you want in and you don't vote for the other ones. So in Georgia, for example, it looks like a lot of people voted for Governor Kemp and didn't vote for Herschel Walker because they bullet voted Kemp.
Yeah, exactly. And that, and to their own detriment, though.
For sure.
They think they're hurting Herschel Walker, but they're really hurting themselves.
Let me ask you, how much of this do you think is people not? I don't want to like sound condescending. But you run into people and you talk to enough people and you're kind of like, okay, people don't understand. Like, how much of this do you think is people not knowing what the Senate does and why it's important?
In some circles, most people do not know.
Right.
And in other circles, they don't care. You have a large segment of Americans who don't give a rip, and there are many others, shamefully, who don't know. They don't know what Congress does. They don't know what the official role of the Supreme Court. They don't know, and they don't know that they don't know. But I blame the schools for that. I blame parents as well. So you have this baked-in situation with the government schools. If the government schools are not brought to heel, they're the biggest enemy of this country are the government schools, because what is taught to one generation dictates the direction the nation takes in the next.
That's true. I don't know if in history classes they get into the down and dirty of like what each branch of government does, how it works. Like I think they may be very general. Like, okay, there's 3 branches of government. The judicial is responsible for this. The executive branch is responsible for this, and the legislative branch is responsible for this. But then do they get into, okay, well, this is what the House does, and this is what the Senate does, and these are their roles and responsibilities, and this is why this is important. And also that same structure is on your state, in your state government. Like, do people understand that?
I don't think they do. Some do, but I don't think others do based on conversations that I have with people.
Same.
But first of all, they need to care. They're not even taught to care about this country. They don't give a rip. Most people born in this country today, Melanie, don't care. And you can tell by the comments, you can tell by the voting process and what they follow. I mean, anyone with any modicum of common sense, if they just from rational self-interest, why would you vote Democrat if you even selfishly wanted a good life?
I don't know. I don't understand it. And like you said, from a logical and just common sense perspective, but it's been my experience in speaking to people that they really don't make, that many really don't make a direct connection between the policies and what's happening in their lives. And even worse than that are the Christians who literally think that their vote is separate from their Christian life. I don't get it. I don't understand it.
You know what? That's almost made me bald-headed because, really, I mean, I'll talk to my fellow Christians, and it's like, I walk away feeling like, Jesus, if I didn't really know you, I'd be out. Because I would have said, I'm through, I'm done. Because I've had Christians tell me to my face, Ron, this politics is dirty. This, that, and the other. We shouldn't be involved.
The whole world is dirty.
Yeah. We're waiting for Jesus to come back. And I say, well, wait a minute. And sometimes I just break it down to the simplest, pablum level of communication. Well, what about your house? Do you clean your house? Would you allow somebody to just walk in your front door and just go raid your refrigerators, a stranger? Would you allow them in your safe and give them your safe and your number, and they could just dial in and take your silver and gold and whatever you have in there, your valuables? No. Well, why should the country?
Right.
It's happening to our house called the United States, our national house. Oh.
If
you go scriptural, if you want to go scriptural for the holier than thou people, and seriously,
for our holy rollers out there, right?
Yeah, they try to throw the word at you and use that as thinking you don't know that God doesn't tell us to be involved in that. Well, yes, He does. He says, "Occupy till I come." He says to take care, be rulers over the earth, subdue the earth, be involved, take care, be stewards. Look up the old-fashioned 1828 Webster's Dictionary definition of stewards. Okay, and I tell them, I said, go there and check it out. I'm not going to tell you, and you come back and tell me if I'm right or you're right.
Well, but see, when we start talking like that, then we get called know-it-alls. I'm not saying I've been called that. We get called condescending. When we start citing studies and things like that, and it's like, because they give you these talking points, and you're like, that is literally not steeped in fact at all. Have you researched it? Like, the Democrats had this talking point about how Republicans are going to get rid of Medicare and Social Security, like we don't have any older people in our lives, that we spread conspiracy theories, that we promote violence and want to curtail voting rights. Where is that true? Anywhere. And of course, on our side of the aisle, we talk about how Democrats have allowed crime to run rampant. Where is the lie? We literally have prosecutors who are not prosecuting, forcing the teaching of race theories, another absolute truth. And when people tell me that, that's not in the classroom, I'm like, go on Amazon and look up CRT in the classroom. You know what you're going to find? Scores and scores of books on CRT in the classroom. Next. It absolutely is in the class. And I've been in education for 20 plus years, but yes, please do enlighten me on how it's not in the classroom, the place that I've been for the last 12. And so both sides of the aisle had these mantras and these things that they focused on, and it just doesn't seem, I don't know if it was productive.
It's productive if you're telling the truth. If they don't want to accept it or not, you're being productive because you are presenting the truth. And if they refuse it, that's on their head, and they'll have to deal with that in due time. But I am just irritated that all of us are impacted by the decisions of these idiots. These people that vote a certain way, and these evil people in government like Talib, also another Michiganian person, Talib, that wicked witch also. Talib. We shot at Talib.
I know exactly who you're talking about. Let's talk about her a little bit more on the other side of the break. We're up against the break, which I'm sure you can appreciate that as a fellow host. We're talking to the one and only Ron Edwards, ladies and gentlemen, host of the Ron Edwards American Experience. We're doing a midterm recap, and we will be back in a few minutes.
Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie features lively discussions of a wide range of global, domestic, and kitchen table financial topics. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie. We're doing a midterms recap with the one and only Ron Edwards, host of the Ron Edwards American Experience. And I wanted to ask you, Ron, about whether or not policy accomplishments matter. I think we touched on this before the break. Like, what do people even look at policies anymore, or are they just voting for their team? Like what is going on? Because I feel like if you're a critical thinker, like we kind of talked about earlier, like how do you're like, yes, crime is up and Democrat prosecutors are not prosecuting crimes and are doing things like letting petty thefts go, but yeah, give me more of that. Like, I don't understand.
It goes back to when you don't have a foundation of good principles, and if you weren't taught proper economics in school, if you weren't taught civics, if you don't have a foundation of anything good, as far as your education is concerned, basically indoctrination, and you don't have a good moral compass, you are going to chase the trash, the political trash, and settle for that. The proof of that is California. The proof of that is Pennsylvania, Michigan, and other places. New York State. Breaks my heart what they have done to New York City. I used to live in New York.
Terrible. I used to visit New York all the time, and I don't anymore because it's just too dangerous.
Yeah, my friends are telling me, Ron, don't come this Christmas season. Don't come, because once you land in Manhattan, especially where you used to live, you'll end up crying or whatever, because I really love the city. I thought it was one of the greatest places on the entire planet, the greatest city in the world, and it's now being trashed because people don't have a foundation of common sense, of morality or anything, and they don't care. Like I said earlier, in Michigan, they would rather have abortion until after birth than prosperity, than freedom or liberty, than a closed or secure border, legal immigration, all the good things, a good life for their children. I mean, all the white people around me were supporting Black Lives Matter. They had their Black Lives Matter sign.
Oh, my word.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And I'm thinking, all these successful people, right? And I'm thinking, my God, the party they support is gunning for their wealth.
150%. The nuclear family gone. Like what? Yeah. and when I would tell people that, they're like, "Oh, where does it say that?" I'm like, literally on their website. It says it on their website. Like, have you ever Googled BLM before you made that donation? Did you?
Yeah. I have a family member who went there, and she said she went to join Black Lives Matter because I guess she was kind of naive, but she went there to Baltimore to join, to check it out. But when they explained to her what's really behind everything, she said she had to get up and just walk out, because in order to be a faithful member of that, as a black female, she said, I would have to hate you and all about my male cousins, this, that, and the other, my dad, yada, yada, yada. And they're about breaking down and destroying the family, because their goal is to destroy Western society.
Exactly. And people don't know that BLM has a curriculum, and that curriculum is online. You want to dig into some crazy? You want to dig into some crazy? Dig into that curriculum. And I mean dig. I mean go into the actual lessons and see what they say. And then talk to me and tell me if you think it's a good thing. I say that because I've done the research.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking that this is what's going on in this great nation. We already had enough problems, okay? Problems that should have been fixed themselves, but all they've done since they weren't fixed was just been added on. The so-called solutions to prior problems are nothing more than exacerbation of problems and piling on of new problems. But this goes back to the earlier part of the 20th century when the leftists of that day were trying to figure out how to bring down this country, and they couldn't. And they said there are three main reasons why they could not. One, those Americans are very optimistic. They're hard workers. They love their families for the most part. Their families are intact, and they love their God. And they read a lot. And so they figured, rather than trying to bite off the entire country, they would hone in on a particular group, and they were trying to figure out who should we go for. And they said the blacks.
Right.
Victimology and get the women. In fact, they did try it with other groups, but it was the only group where a large number of black females went along with this, with the government stipend, get the man out of the house, yada, yada, yada.
Why are you trying to start trouble? See, you on my show, you made it a whole 45 minutes. And here you go.
Melanie, I gotta yank the chain once. You know that.
But you know what? I'm gonna stay focused. I'll deal with you on social media later, sir.
No, but really, I mean, it's heartbreaking for me to say it. I joke about it.
No, I know what you mean, though. I do.
I gotta laugh because it hurts, really.
It does. Now, I want to. As long as we're talking about sensitive topics where we're going to fight, I want to ask you about what effect you think Trump had on these midterms. It seems, at least as they're kind of beginning to do the autopsies on some of these elections, that perhaps Trump saying that elections were rigged and that Democrats are constantly cheating, that there's a contingent of Republicans that stayed home, and perhaps that is a reason why the red wave was a little more like a red ripple. What do you think about that?
Well, unfortunately, there is truth in what he's saying. And I saw, there's a local example I could tell you about that happened just last night. You had, in Troy, Michigan, you had a whole gaggle of foreigners who did not understand English. They were brought into the voting apparatus place, and they were telling these people who to vote for. They don't even speak English or anything. And I figured they must be illegals or whatever. And there's a lot of that going on. There were drop-offs in the middle of the night, even last night in Arizona, and then now you have the machines messing up. You're having some of the same problems. And I got word today that they were supposedly sifting some votes from Herschel Walker.
Is this in in Georgia? So you're saying in the battleground states?
Yes, those kinds of things did happen. Unfortunately, back to what you and I were talking about a few minutes ago, there's a lot of people, even on our side, that are so brainwashed and so emotional, they cannot accept the fact that Trump could be right about certain things. Because, first of all, they don't like Trump because, oh my God, he's not politically correct. He doesn't kiss the backside of people like Mitch McConnell. we hate this guy. How dare he fight back the way he does? Forget the fact, all the great things he did for the country, okay?
Right. But, listen, I'm with you on that. You know where you and I part ways is his personality.
Yes, I know.
Listen, I voted for the man twice, though, because here's my reasoning. And this is what the part that I don't really understand about people, and even about the presidential. You're like, okay, we were energy independent. We had low taxes. We had low unemployment. We had all these good things going on in the country. No war. We were not on the brink of a nuclear war. Nobody had attacked us. et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these good things, this good climate from a presidential policy standpoint. I don't understand what kind of analysis you're doing when you're saying, yes, I liked all of that, but I don't like his personality, so I'm going to vote against my own self-interest. Like if you were hiring a plumber and you found out that he was the best plumber in the whole wide world and you had a complex plumbing problem, but you found out he cheats on his wife. Are you going to go to like the C-rate plumber because he's a monk? Or are you going to get, I mean, honestly, or are you going to get the best plumber who's a cheater? Because to me, that's between him and his wife. Fix my plumbing.
You know, there was a lot of holier-than-thou fellow Christians who had that very attitude. But yet these same people to this day, I've never heard them say any really complaints about Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, Chucky Schumer, Fetterman, any of these people who are out to destroy this country, Ellison in Minnesota, whatever. No problem with those people. But how dare someone on our side be strong like Trump and fight back and whatever and snap back? Or as these ministers that I used to have conversations with, they kind of cut me off. They brought up the fact that he was a playboy. He was a womanizer. And I asked him, did he ever force himself on anybody?
Nope.
And I told him, I said, well, if God was like you, he would have never forgiven King David, who he said was a man after his own heart.
Hello?
So, and then I really, this is why I don't hear from him anymore, because I said, I know what the problem is. When you were young, you didn't have a lot of chicks liking you, and you're still pissed off. You're mad at Trump.
The shade. But facts, though. Facts. Listen, whenever I get down on myself about my sinful nature, I think about the Apostle Paul, right? Who slaughtered 300, very famously in the Bible, slaughtered 300 Christians. And then was the Apostle Paul, and if you know anything about the Bible, you know what an integral part he played in Christianity. Yes. So you're thinking, okay, I didn't do that. Like, maybe I'm gonna be okay because it just speaks to the forgiveness of God. But so I take that back to Trump and him being a playboy. He was a millionaire. Like what are we doing? He doesn't have the most graceful personality, and the problem is, and this is the problem that I have with politics, if you want to call it a problem. When you're deeply involved in politics, it's very important that you stay on message. So you're not supposed to say anything bad about the candidate. You're not supposed to ever say, like, I didn't love what he just said about that. Like, you're always supposed to be positive, positive, positive. I don't like that part about politics because I think that we should be authentic.
Yeah. And see, the thing is, speaking of authentic, I love how Trump used to authentically handle world leaders.
Yes.
Xi Jinping was very respectful of Trump because, he moved you out of the way for pictures at those summits. Merkel, all those people, they really respected the guy because it was like he came in there in the room and he knew they didn't like him, but he didn't care. And he says, look, I represent the United States of America. If it wasn't for us, you all would have a much worse problem than you already do. So you're going to respect me. And they did.
And it's called a reverent respect, right?
Yes.
A reverent
Putin,
fear.
If Trump had been reelected, I promise you, Melanie, Putin would not have been provoked to the point where he invaded Ukraine. The man was provoked, and I had warned before he went in there that NATO needs to stop screwing with that man. And plus, Trump and Putin were working together to clean out the human trafficking and the money laundering operations in Ukraine. That was the dirtiest nation in the world.
Yep.
In those areas.
That's facts.
Putin had spoken out back in the 1990s about.
My producer just gave me the 2-minute warning, Ron. I hate to cut you off, but because I want to ask you this before we go.
Sure.
All right, 2024. What do you? I know. We just finished the midterms. I know, but you know how it is. You're in the political trenches. It's always. I told somebody this not too long ago. They're like, "Oh, so when's the next election cycle?" I'm like, "Now." I'm like, what are we talking about? It's always the election cycle. The 2024.
absolutely.
What do you think, especially with DeSantis with that humongous landslide?
I'm going to tell you something. I love DeSantis as the governor of Florida, but I don't trust him to be our president.
Really?
I think, he's a Skull and Bones member, and there are things about him. That's why I was wondering why in recent weeks he was cozying up a lot with people like Deputy Dupalon Mitch McConnell, that crowd, that ilk. And he's been having meetings, and they're stabbing Trump in the back, and all of a sudden, like on Fox today, they're all giddy because of DeSantis. Oh, yeah, Trump was great, but basically they toss him aside, and I'm thinking, these people are stupid.
I think they're...
I'm not thinking.
Yeah, I think, well, for those of us who are excited about this kind of stuff, it's going to be interesting, but it's not... Like I'm already hearing like the shade is already coming out of the Trump camp for DeSantis, and I don't know, man.
Trump needs to stop that.
Thank you.
He needs to shut
up. Thank you, Ron Edwards. I'm just playing that clip. I'm just kidding.
Play it.
That's the post that's gonna go with the clip of this show.
Hey, send it to Trump, and hopefully he'll listen because he needs in this area. Because people are emotional and they don't delve into the facts, and the only thing they'll hear is what he said, and that will just.
Yep.
He needs to leave it alone.
You're right. So tell people where they can find you, where they can find your show, where they can follow your musings, and listen to the Ron Edwards Notebook, which we need to get back on the show because it's fabulous. Where they can find that.
Well, you can check out the Ron Edwards American Experience. Everyone, I'm not going to tell you all the networks, but simply go to KStarTalkRadio.com every day, weekdays at 3 p.m., and also on AmericaMatters.us, which is KHOY Radio, FM 106.7 in Reno, Nevada, and other radio stations out west. But mainly go to The Daily Show, and you can find out where everything is. Go to theronedwards.com, the website, and you can go directly there. And didn't have enough time to tell you, but we also have the world's greatest coffee. But anyway, that's another story.
And follow him on Twitter at The Real Ron Edwards.
What now?
We follow you on Twitter at The Ron Edwards.
No, my Twitter account was taken out because they didn't like something I said. Well, more than one thing.
Shocker!
So I'm gonna open up a new Twitter account, and so we'll get that established. But yeah,
excellent. Ron Edwards.
It's a real treat.
Ron Edwards, ladies and gentlemen, this was fantastic, just like I thought it would be. Thank you so much for doing the midterm recap. It was fantastic. I appreciate you so much, sir. Ron Edwards, the Ron Edwards American Experience. We'll be back after the break.
Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Back to Money Talk with Melanie. We are headed into the 8 o'clock hour, the second hour of the show, where our guest will be Dr. Jennifer London. She's a co-author of Leadership and Legacy by the executive chairman of CACI, talking to us about business and entrepreneurship for veterans. If you missed the first hour, shame, shame, shame on you. You missed the one and only Ron Edwards, who is the host of the Ron Edwards American Experience. And he's just very knowledgeable about all things politics and culture. And I wanted to have him on the show to discuss the midterm election results. And he did not disappoint. I only got to like a third of my notes. He just has such very interesting insights and things to say. He definitely has a point of view, so to speak, but it is very interesting to grasp his notes that are based on a solid foundation of Christianity, history, and the Constitution, which to me are all very good things. So just a very interesting hour. And if you missed it, you can go back and listen to it as a podcast when it's posted in another day or two on 98.7 The Coast website, or on any of the platforms where you enjoy your podcasts, such as Apple Podcasts or Spotify or iHeartRadio or any of those things. Or you can catch the link by following me on any of my social media, particularly Money Talk with Melanie, the Facebook page, or at Money Talk Mel on Twitter. If you dare and would like to get my political musings via Twitter, you can follow me at NJGOP Diva. And I live up to the name as much as possible, especially the diva part, I'm told, but whatever. It's a matter of opinion. Now, we do have some other news stories that I wanted to talk about. In the first hour, I talked about Zuckerberg laying off 13% of his staff, but I thought he handled it pretty well. I ran into another article today that really ground my gears. It really ticked me off. I was trying to find a nice way of expressing how upset I was when I read this article. And I heard about this before. So Walmart fired a kid with Down syndrome. I'm like, really though? For real? And they got sued, and justifiably so, in my opinion. So they recently tried to ask for a new trial because the judge justifiably nailed them to the wall. And I'm kind of a big Walmart fan, as long as I don't have to actually go in there. And I can order online. But a federal judge recently dismissed Walmart's request for a new trial in a disability discrimination lawsuit. Last year, a jury found that the retailer wrongfully fired Marlu Spaeth. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. She's a woman with Down syndrome who worked there for nearly 16 years in a Walmart supercenter. I'm getting progressively more ticked off as I read this again. A Walmart spokesperson said the company is reviewing the opinion and considering our options. How about not being jerks to somebody with Down syndrome who worked for you for 16 years? How about that maybe? Just saying. So, man, and maybe I'm sensitive about this too because, I taught a student with Down syndrome who was just the sweetest, kindest, nicest kid I ever met. And this just made me like so super mad. So the court ordered Walmart to pay more than $125 million in damages. Write that check. One of the highest ever single victim won in the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Good. The federal agency filed a disability discrimination suit on Spaeth's behalf. Ha! Now, the damages were reduced by the judge to $300,000, which is the maximum allowed under the law. But they were trying to make a point of how wrong Walmart was on this. The judge also ordered them to pay Spaeth more than $50,000 in back pay and immediately rehire her if she's still interested in having the job. So I'm glad that this happened. I'm glad that they didn't get a new trial. And how dare they? Like, what are we doing here? Really? So that just really ticked me off, something terrible. Now, a little Twitter news. I hate to hear that Elon Musk is struggling in the rollout of the new Twitter, the new free speech public square space, because I'm a big fan of Elon Musk and all the shade. And if you don't follow him on Twitter, just for the fun, just for the trolling alone, because it's just so entertaining. Like, literally, sometimes I won't be able to sleep and I'll be like, I wonder what Elon's up to. And I'll saunder on over to the Twitterverse and at Elon Musk to see what he's up to. And he never disappoints, ever. So he was doing this, rolling out this $8 a month Twitter blue option where you can get the blue check mark. And I'm not going to lie. I've been wondering, like, when am I going to get my blue check mark? I'm not blue check mark worthy yet, apparently. I haven't gotten there yet, but I feel like, I don't know. I feel like paying the $8 is like, chicks who use filters in their dating profile. That is just wrong. Like, I'm not, I don't use any filters. I'm just not going to like fake my way to my check mark. Like, I want my check mark legitimately. So I shall wait patiently and build my audience. By the way, did I mention you can follow me at NJGOP Diva or at Money Talk Mel? Like, follow me on both, because the sister wants her blue check mark, is all I'm saying. But in the meantime, but the rollout has not been going very well, apparently. A lot of people, what people are doing, and this, I think, was to be anticipated, people are just, like, buying accounts just to, like, clown other people, which, okay, if you can cancel at any time, it's kind of worth it, right? For $8, would you just like to troll somebody on social media and just have fun absolutely torturing them because they're little snowflakes and weak-minded and just get completely triggered by every little thing you say? Yeah, that sounds like, I mean, with inflation being what it is, that's a good time for $8. That's all I'm saying. For a whole month. And when people complain about, the free speech, I'm like, ever follow me? I said this on Newsmax. I'm on Newsmax, by the way, once a week, every Monday at 3:30. And we were talking about the Twitterverse. And I said, go follow at NJGOP Diva sometime. And see the things that people who are clutching their pearls that I happen to be black and a Republican, and see the kinds of things that they say on my Twitter page. If I melted down every time somebody called me a racial slur or a name, or said I was never really taught on a college level, or any of the crazy things that people say in the Twitterverse, I would not survive. So just let people say what they want to say and stop being a baby. Okay? Use your little thumbs and keep scrolling. It is not complicated. But Elon Musk is having some serious trouble that he's got to handle. And why am I looking at Mario? Oh, I do know why I'm looking at that, because this is one of those trolls. So somebody has a Nintendo doofus account, and it's Mario with a middle finger, which I almost fell out laughing right on the air because it's very funny. I didn't notice this picture the last time I read the article, but it's very funny. But yeah, so there's been some stumbling blocks, but with any new thing, there could possibly be some stumbling blocks. I'm still cheering for Elon to straighten out this Twitter mess, and it's going to be all good by 2024. Let's hope. I want 45 back. Not because I loved his tweets, but I just loved the reaction to his tweets. Like, can we stop, please? Anyway, you're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. After the break, we'll be back with my second hour guest, Dr. Jennifer London.
Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
This is important because it's your money. Your money. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie. And before I move on, by the way, shout out to MrCreditRepair.biz for sponsoring Money Talk with Melanie, a.k.a. Mr. Robert Houston. He is the absolute man. And by next week, we may have an additional sponsor coming on board. It'll be a surprise. I'm not going to reveal who that is right now, but I think by next week we'll have another sponsor coming on board, so I'm very excited about that. I kind of want to tell you, but I'm not going to. You'll have to listen to the show to know who the next the additional sponsor that's coming on board here at Money Talk with Melanie. It's just great, and I'm very excited about it. But our next guest is Dr. Jennifer London, who holds a PhD in psychology from The Ohio State University and postdoctoral education in marketing from the University of Pittsburgh School of Business. She has a diversified background in strategic planning, business development, executive hiring, development, and outplacement, as well as marketing and community relations. She is the president of her own consulting firm, where her work has included evaluating and developing potential customers nationwide for the development of new and expanded markets for companies ranging from private businesses to Fortune 100 corporations. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Jennifer London to the show.
Well, hello. It's so good to be here and to spend this time with you and your guests. I appreciate that introduction, but I'm here to talk about the book that my husband wrote, Dr. J. Philip London.
Yes.
And the name of the book is Ever Vigilant: Leadership and Legacy by the Executive Chairman of CACI, J. Philip London, who actually goes by Jack, or went by Jack, was a Naval Academy graduate, spent 12 years active duty, and then as a reserve officer, he took a job with a small consulting firm called CACI. And over 50 years, he built the company to a $5.6 billion company with 23,000 employees worldwide in about 150 offices. And so I think it's a great book. It's about leadership. I think during these times, especially this week with our elections, we're looking for good leaders and good role models. And I think reading this book will give folks a good sense of good leadership and someone who's a role model. So Jack was, I think that the story is very compelling. It's about winning and achieving excellence. And so I think Jack, who was a patriot, former military officer, eventually became a legend in the United States government contracting industry. And I think folks will find his story to be very compelling. He starts out from growing up in Oklahoma, deciding to go to the Naval Academy, realizing that the values of honor, courage, and commitment were something that he could build his career on. He always said that his decision to go into the Naval Academy and the Navy were defining moments in his life. And so he incorporated the ideals that he learned serving his country, and at the Naval Academy, he incorporated those ideals in his leadership and emphasized those throughout his life. So, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no. I was going to say certainly. And a couple of times that when I talked about you coming on the show, that's how I introduced you as the co-author of Ever Vigilant: Leadership and Legacy by the executive chairman of CACI. I did. I just did your quick bio, but yes, we're definitely going to talk about that. I'm particularly interested in the fact that he married his military experience to and applied that leadership experience in the corporate world, because I think that we miss that in how we value our veterans.
Yes, and interestingly, Jack was a veteran, and many people in his company were veterans. In fact, the company made an effort to hire veterans. In 2018, for instance, 47% of their new hires were veterans, and about a third of the company are veterans. And the company was recognized in the GI Jobs as one of the top 100 military-friendly employers. CivilianJobs.com placed the company among the most valuable employers for military. Military Times Edge voted the company among the best of the vets' employees. I could go on and on. You can read about it in the book. By the way, all proceeds from the book are going to military organizations. It's something that Jack and I supported always, and I continue to contribute to these organizations, and all proceeds from the book will go to military organizations.
Certainly,
So,
and I think we got a little bit ahead of ourselves, because I spoke about you being the co-author of the book, and I think we should go back and explain to the audience why you're the co-author and why we're speaking about your co-author in the past tense. I think we should go back and just kind of set the table there.
Sure, absolutely, and I apologize for not mentioning that earlier. So Jack completed his memoir, and by the end of 2020, and he passed away in January of 2021. And from that point on, I worked on putting photos in, the cover design, and getting it into editing, getting it into publication. So I am one of the co-authors. His assistant, Celine Herr, is also a co-author. She was great at doing research and supporting the project as well. So she and I completed the book. There wasn't a lot to complete because his story was told. In fact, if you read the book, it's not sort of written in a textbook style. It is like he's talking to you. And he had a certain way. He was from Oklahoma, so he had a certain way of talking. It was very, matter of fact and pragmatic. So I'm here to promote the book because Jack no longer is, but certainly his spirit and his story, continue.
Indeed. And he really believed in the importance of entrepreneurship.
Yes, and he spoke about that in the book. He recognized that even though this company was started by two people who worked at Rand, Harry Markowitz and Herb Carr, out of California, they left Rand and provided consulting to a new software program called SimScript, because at that time, even though the program was out there, there weren't many people that were available to offer, problem solving and things like that, troubleshooting for this program. So they started a consulting company. Harry left after 5 years, and Herb got to the point where he just didn't want to continue the daily operations, and the company, which was started in 1965, Harry left in 67. Herb brought Jack in 1972 and said, you take care of it, Jack. I don't want to have a boss, but I don't want to be a boss. So basically from that point on, Jack engaged in entrepreneurial activities by especially creating a strategic mergers and acquisitions program. And it was actually through a lot of acquisitions. The company did 80 acquisitions.
Wow.
If you can get your head around that. And it grew. That's how the company grew from like a small consulting firm over the years. Jack was very good at sort of recognizing future trends. And so he figured out those strategic markets of where he wanted the company to go. And he would buy other companies that were in that space, such as Intel. And so when 9/11 happened, the company was positioned to address, the security needs and intel needs of the country. And in fact, the stock market was closed for a week, but when it opened, Jack was, I think, the first person on Wall Street being interviewed about what the company did. And today, there are over 100 government agencies that rely on CACI. I don't rely on, but that the company supports.
Sure.
So it's providing, supporting critical missions of our country.
That's what I was about to ask you, to tell the audience specifically what it is that CACI does and why they're such an important company.
Sure. They do IT security, and so over 90% of their their market is the Department of Defense. So they work in the various agencies. And years ago, Jack was one of the first to point out the importance of cyber, cybersecurity, and why our government and our defense industry needed to focus on that. And then in 2008, he created a program. He called it the Asymmetric Threat Symposium to talk about national security issues. And he also created a series of white papers where he talked about the importance of the electromagnetic spectrum and how important it is, how important our dominance in that space is, yet how vulnerable it is as well. I mean, it transcends everything: land, air, space.
It does. And now,
cyber.
Now you're going to have to, you opened a can of worms, right? So now I've had cybersecurity experts on the show before, so I'm familiar with the electromagnetic thing, but I'm sure I don't think a lot of people are. Can you explain what that is?
Well, everything we use, whether it's Wi-Fi or cellular or advanced military weaponry, relies on, it's like a wave, radio wavelength, I guess, or a very basic way of describing it.
Right.
And so the most active player in that space is China.
Yep.
But Russia has demonstrated its dexterity as well, because they shut down. They froze and paralyzed Estonia, Georgia, and Ukraine and surrounding areas prior to invading those countries. So, if our grids go down, we can't go to the bank, we can't buy food, think about how much we can't use our cell phones. It paralyzes. I think it was Estonia. They even were able to. Russia was able to get into the government, the parliament, and just infiltrate and paralyze their their cyber networks in key operations of the countries, those countries.
Yeah, that's absolutely frightening. You'll hear cyber experts talk about EMPs. That's what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. when electromagnetic pulses used mm-hmm. as an attack, can be used as an attack, and it is really just extremely mm-hmm. scary to think about, because I don't mm-hmm. think, like you talked about earlier, that we have the infrastructure to protect ourselves against that. And side note, if you live anywhere near the White House in D.C., mm-hmm. and you know what I'm about to say, right? Mm-hmm. And the president is traveling, if he's moving, mm-hmm. cell phones stop working.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like the government has the power to do that. Just
yeah. And driving down the George Washington Parkway,
yep.
you get near the CIA, your phone
suddenly stops working. That's the government.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
But China actually, they created these elite core groups of people who, their focus was cyber, hacking, and they're doing the same thing with the electromagnetic spectrum. They're pouring a lot of resources into, and China's strategy is their military strategy is gaining leverage, and they're doing the same thing with the electromagnetic spectrum. So we need to maintain our dominance. It's actually a national priority. I didn't mean to get too deep into the subject.
No. But I think it's important that you do. I mean, I think, that's why I would imagine the title of the book is Ever Vigilant, and you're speaking to the why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, he doesn't get into that, but he tells the story, and it's mostly about building the company. What I was trying to point out earlier is that he was talking about EMS, the electromagnetic spectrum, in 2008 and 9, prior to when our, Intel community was focusing seriously on it in 2016. So his ability to read he was known for that, being able to kind of look out at the horizon, recognize the problems and the needs, and try to position the company, which again is how he grew it, because he got into those spaces that met the needs of the market and the government. And, if I could go back a little bit to what we were talking about earlier, those lessons he learned in the military, he talks about in the book hiring people, and this is a good lesson for our elections, our leaders, and so on. He talks about he wanted people who were mission oriented, like in the military, not what he called politically oriented with the small p. Those people that wanted to be political, play the game, get credit for things that went well, but were more for their own self-advancement and promotion. He wanted people just, focused on the mission, let's get the job done. And I think if we look at our leaders, if we look at our government, if we look at our candidates, it's the mission-focused people that get the job done. And that's what the military teaches.
And what's interesting about the comment that you just made regarding those people is that if you are mission focused, the self-promotion will come.
Right. You'll get the credit.
Exactly.
And he talks about he was an aviator. And so he talked about how important teamwork and trust was. I mean, when you're landing Senator Warner once made a comment I'll never forget. He said he had flown out and he was looking down at an aircraft carrier, and he said, I couldn't figure out how these aviators could land on something that looked like the size of a postage stamp. Because when you're up in the air, there's the carrier in the sea looking very tiny. But it was because there was a team down there, that had the wire that was, signaling and everything. And the aviator needed to trust. They knew their job, and, it was teamwork. So, again, that carries into business. It carries into industry. And, again, those are lessons that he learned and he took with him in his leadership.
I love that. And does he attribute that to partially because of having a natural talent, or really just analyzing and critically thinking about how his experience in the military can be applied to his successful business pursuits?
Yeah. Well, I think he talks about in the book, both of his parents were entrepreneurs. So he understood being responsible for a business and, again, that trust factor. His dad, a lot of business then was a handshake or, knowing that there was an agreement and a commitment between the customer and the person who was providing the service or the product. And so I think he understood, he had a business sense, growing up because he was exposed to it. And then going through the military experience, that added another layer of learning, again, those basic principles of, what really creates leadership and a good entrepreneur. So I think it was a combination of both. But he always said he felt the Naval Academy was the finest institution of its kind in the world. There are naval, academies and schools and so on all around the world. But he felt that the Naval Academy was such a great foundation for his later successes.
Interesting. Now, in the book, he refers to himself as an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. As opposed to an entrepreneur. And how does he make that distinction?
Well, entrepreneur is an actual term. It's someone who works inside an organization, hence not entrepreneur, but intrapreneur, who utilizes the existing resources to grow and build and create. And that's what he did. We think of entrepreneurs as somebody who starts from scratch and, creates and builds and so on. At CACI, he led 2 turnarounds in the company, and at one point saved the company from being sold at a premium by putting, at that time, all of his own savings, which was $600,000, into the company to own enough stock, controlling stock to keep because he had a vision that it could grow. So he really took ownership of the company, and in the sense that he, as he says in the book, he had skin in the game. And so there is a chapter on what entrepreneurship is, and it wasn't a term I was familiar with until he wrote the book. But it is very interesting. It's a distinction, but not a large distinction.
Yeah, I think it's going to be new to a lot of people, and it's one of the things that I appreciate about the book. We're up against the break, but we'll talk more about that on the other side of the break. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. Our guest this hour is Dr. Jennifer London. She's a co-author of Ever Vigilant, Leadership and Legacy by the Executive Chairman of CACI. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by Mr. Credit Repair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie features entrepreneurs, CEOs, and politicos who are experts in their fields. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
We're back on Money Talk with Melanie. Our guest this hour is Dr. Jennifer London. She's a co-author of the book Ever Vigilant, Leadership and Legacy by the Executive Chairman of CACI. And she's talking to us about the book. Where can you find the book if you wanted to pick that up? Where will we find it?
Well, Ever Vigilant is on Amazon, Amazon.com, and it's also at Barnes & Noble. So those are 2 places you can either order it or, Barnes & Noble, pick the book up. And again, I think Ben Franklin said he had an interesting quote: either write something worth reading or do something worth writing. And I think Jack did both. I think that this is a book about somebody who had an interesting life, and he wrote about it in an interesting way. I mean, he actually experienced some very important historical events in his life. He was in the Cuban Missile Crisis blockade as an aviator. He was down there on one of the, he was down there on a carrier. He knew that the order came from the president. He knew it was something. It's interesting. He said, we don't have the technology we have today with iPhones and all of that, the internet. So, their way of communicating was much more rudimentary. So they didn't recognize, the military who were down there at the time didn't realize the gravity of the situation until later, and yet they were living it and experiencing it. So he was part of that blockade. And he was also on the recovery team for John Glenn's first American orbit around the Earth.
Oh, wow.
He was selected for the recovery team for that as well. So he lived quite a full life and a very purposeful life. So
that is excellent. One of the things that I like about the book is the footnotes are so interesting. Mm-hmm. Like the most interesting footnotes that, like, you usually when you see footnotes in a book, you're like, meh.
Yeah.
But these footnotes are
very
awesome.
Detailed, right?
Yes.
They're like part of the story. Some of them take up quite a bit of space, but that was Jack. He was interesting because he was a big picture person, which is what is needed in a leader, but he could also get down into the details. And he was in fact, one of his CEOs was quoted in a magazine. He said, with Jack, if I went into his office, I never knew if he was going to ask me the 30,000-foot question or like the 1-inch question. So he had to be prepared for, the big picture and the little picture.
Oh, I like that. But yeah, I'm like the footnotes are like almost could be their own book. They're just so interesting and add so much to the stories.
Yeah, and again, he wrote more than one book. He wrote a book called Character: The Ultimate Success Factor, and he over time spoke to over like 10,000 people around the country. A lot of the military academies and the war colleges, and so he was quite prolific in that way. His character book started out simply to be a paper that he was writing for his employees because he really focused on the importance of character and integrity in business. And he was ultimately recognized as a leader in business ethics, and received some recognition for that. But so this paper that he was writing for his employees to stress the importance of integrity, ethics, and character ended up to be a book that he also spoke about to quite a few people.
Now, that is interesting because I feel like that's something that's not emphasized as much in this day and age as an important factor or important factors in being a successful entrepreneur. I feel like, we have more of a narrative in this day and age that it's important to be cutthroat and get yours and not care about anybody else.
Mm-hmm. Well, and he points out there are companies that tried that and ultimately, they failed. And he points to the fact they failed their employees as well. Corporations, in many senses, are not given, there's sometimes a negative connotation to the word corporation, but if you think of them as employers that give people a livelihood, income, quality of life, they're so important. But some corporations out there have failed because of greed or, fraud or, unethical behavior. But Jack, not only was it important to him to have a company that, demonstrated ethics and integrity, but he recognized it was a market differentiator, that his customers, if they knew, knowing that the company had this doctrine of ethics and integrity, could trust the company to not, cut corners or do something that was not ethical. And so building a reputation on that was also good business strategy as well.
For sure. And there's one a piece of the book or section of the book where he talks about the importance of commitment. And in this day and age, I think with the advent of the internet and the smartphone and us having just immediate access to so much, that people have a hard time with that word commitment and how it connects to success.
Well, it takes effort. And if I can speak a little bit to the discrepancy between how much, CEOs and people who lead these large companies make and the employees, because there's, there are articles, there are commentaries about that. It's about supply and demand. CEOs, leaders, people who can step into that role, it's a rare person. And again, some are better than others. But I remember, if you're familiar with Under Armour, the person who started that, I heard him speak many years ago as he was starting out. And he said, the CEO is the person that, sweats on his pillow at night. And I'll never forget that, because that literally, described my husband, because he took the risks. He identified the opportunities. He's the one, that signed the papers, because, it's like Harry Truman said, the buck stopped there at the top. And he took that responsibility very seriously. And so, leaders, there's a big demand for commitment when you are a good leader. You have to be committed to that role.
Exactly. And I've tried to explain this on my show many a times, and that's why when you said if you could indulge me so you could explain this, I was like, absolutely, because I've explained it a few times. I worked at a private school, and I worked with many wealthy people and entrepreneurs, and I've explained to the audience, because like you said, there's much commentary and, quite frankly, shade thrown on the amount of money that these people make. And I'm like, do you have any idea what their lives are like, or the amount of responsibility that they have?
And it weighs heavily. The good thing about Jack is he didn't need a lot of sleep. I mean, I couldn't keep up with him. He was 20 years older, or 25 years, whatever, and he had all of this energy. He did not have to, sleep long hours, and that was good, because his job was a 24/7 job. And I remember early on in our relationship, it was, late at night, and he said, I've got to call Tom, his CEO. And he's dialing. I thought he was going to leave a message, because of the time. Tom picks up the phone and answers, and I thought, wow, these people never sleep.
Exactly.
I mean, they're just like call all the time. And so it does require a lot of responsibility and commitment, and that's it's a heavy. I don't want to say heavy burden. It's a heavy responsibility, because I think some people enjoy it and are proud that they can do the job, but it does have that side of recognizing that the risk lies on their shoulders.
Right. The level of risk, the level of responsibility. I was explaining to someone, I was like, have you ever talked to a CEO or a business owner or an entrepreneur who's super successful? Do you know what their lives are like? Do you have any idea how much of their kids' stuff they miss? How much, how much sleep that they don't get, like you said, because of the level of responsibility. If you think for 1 second that they're clocking in at 9 and leaving at 5 and taking, 3-month-long vacations, I can assure you they are not. And that is why they make the money that they make.
Yeah. And, Jag and I traveled around the world a number of times, and it didn't matter where we were. He was working the time zone of where the headquarters were. So he would be sending, faxes in the middle of the night, or somebody would be knocking on the door, bringing faxes, or he'd be on the phone, because he didn't leave it behind. It went wherever he went. And there again, it shows how seriously he took that responsibility. And so, again, I think, ever vigilant leadership and legacy by the executive chairman of CACI is a good read, because it has so many levels of, somebody growing up in Oklahoma, going to the Naval Academy, going in the Navy, and then taking on this 50 years of building a company, $5.6 billion company with 23,000 employees all over the world, doing some of the most important and critical missions for our country. So
right. I mean, this is, not only is he responsible for this huge company, but the work that he did was just so important.
And by the way, while you're on that subject, it's also his response. He took seriously the responsibility that the government is paying with taxpayer money.
Wow.
And he always said, we have an obligation to do a good job, to be ethical, to have good integrity because the taxpayers are paying this. This is taxpayer money.
Right.
And so he really thought, he was very thoughtful about what he did and recognizing that, didn't take it for granted. And the responsibility of not squandering or taking for granted that the American people, support these efforts that also support the government.
And not only that, but it's a needed service. I mean, nothing against making widgets, but this was not making widgets. This is way more important than making widgets. So, you want to do a good job on your widgets that you make, but you want to do a darn good job when you're protecting the biggest nation on Earth's security.
And its military and its agencies and, having many of those people with, the highest level of security clearances because of the type of work they're doing.
Exactly. And so it's just so important. And the other thing about the book, the overarching story, in my opinion, really speaks to the American dream, because he really did have, some humble beginnings and then turned into this rock star.
Yes. And I think, again, it should be inspirational. And I've always said that, what gives people real opportunity in America is education. I came from I have 10 brothers and sisters. I came from a family of 11 kids.
Wow.
We graduated high school, and we didn't have, we grew up on a farm, not a lot of money, and we knew we were on our own. We all got educated, and we're hard workers. And that's, remember the Horatio Alger story? That used to be, the book that everybody pointed to as somebody who, came to America and made a life for themselves, built a life. And so I think that's been lost a lot. I don't know why. I think our educational, system has failed us by not emphasizing how education creates opportunity.
Indeed. And as a former public school teacher, I could not agree more. I've only been out 2 months. And one of the reasons why I left is because of just not having the ability to instill that importance into kids. And I think you're right about that. And it's a problem.
And teachers are so important because this is who children see, every day, 5 days a week. And that's where they should get their inspiration and motivation, and the recognition of that learning and being in school is so important, and how it can open doors for them. And so, and in America, again, Jack and I traveled all over the world, and he makes a comment in the book that having done so, he has recognized what a treasure America is. And so we were always baffled that anybody would, speak badly or think badly of the United States. I joked once that I wanted to start a company called One Way Ticket. I would give everybody that thought it was so bad, I'll give them a one way to anywhere they want to go, okay? Because believe me, every time we came back, we were so grateful for this country because it's the freedoms and it's the opportunities that America provides, and that's what we have to preserve. You don't get that in other countries. There are limitations, And so I feel very strongly that we have to get back that national pride and a real understanding of what America represents and the opportunities, and especially the freedom.
I couldn't agree more. I've truly enjoyed having you on the show. Tell people the title of the book one more time and where they can find it.
Sure. It's Ever Vigilant, Leadership and Legacy by the Executive Chairman of CACI by Dr. J. Philip London. And it's at Barnes & Noble and Amazon. And all proceeds of the book go to military organizations, mostly Navy, but we give to all of the organizations out there that we've been supporting for a number of years.
I love it. Dr. Jennifer London, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being on Money Talk with Melanie. Have a great night.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Have a nice evening.
Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie features entrepreneurs, CEOs, and politicos who are experts in their fields. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back, and I'd really love to thank Ron Edwards and Dr. Jennifer London for being my guests on the show this evening. I want to thank my rock star producer, Sam, for doing a great job on the boards this evening. I want to thank everyone who is listening tonight, and if you were listening via podcast, thank you. Definitely want to give a shout out to Robert Houston, a.k.a. MrCreditRepair.biz. Thank you for sponsoring the show, and remember to tune in next week for another informative episode of Money Talk with Melanie. Why? This is important because, after all, it's your money.